And with that preamble that we will never make publicly available to the rest of you, welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I am your host, Evan Morgan, Director of Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. I'm joined, as per usual, by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Jeremy Tech-Teal. Good morning, scientists, engineers, charlatans, sycophants, people that rule youth baseball games because it's highly informative about their own personal ego and not about development when they're like 8 or 9 years old. Welcome. In the words of Frank White in the film King of New York, you're all welcome. You seen that one? Mm-mm. Dude, it's a vintage Abel Ferreira. Okay. Abel Ferreira was a wild director in like I guess that would be mid to late 70s in New York. Okay. I want to say he did some like the early Harvey Keitel stuff. He directed some movies. I think he directed at least one movie that wouldn't be shown in a general theater, sure, if you pick up what I'm putting down.
In fact, I do.
Yeah. But King of New York is probably actually my favorite Christopher Walken movie of all time, and then Deer Hunter comes in second. Like it's if you're into like gangster New York movies, Christopher Walken crushes in that movie. Okay. Anyways, welcome to the Youth Baseball podcast that you joined and not like Film School 101. Housekeeping as per usual, and we're going to do housekeeping in reverse order.
We could do an episode on baseball movies, though.
We have to do an episode on baseball movies because...
And specifically youth baseball movies and what they get right and wrong.
Yeah, because we have to get to the bottom of whether Field of Dreams is a good movie or not. And it seems like I've seen this uptick lately of people that are like, that's a legit bad movie. And then other people that are like, I love that movie.
So here's my take, which maybe we'll just talk about baseball movies on the spot. I love Field of Dreams. The book as well.
Yeah.
Like the shoe showing me the book. I love Michael Schur. For those of you who don't know Michael Schur, co-creator, I think, of The Office, creator of Parks and Rec, creator of The Good Place, and a bunch of other stuff.
Is Superstore his?
I don't know. I never watched Superstore.
It's actually not bad.
But he also has a baseball podcast.
He does?
With Joe Posnanski. Called The Poscast. And I love that because I like baseball and I like that kind of comedy, so I enjoy listening to them.
And Joe is a phenomenal writer.
And Joe's a phenomenal writer.
Like was it the Baseball 100?
Yeah. And of course I'm gonna forget the name of it, but the Buck O'Neill book that he wrote was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I have it, and of course I'm gonna forget the name of it. But they had they had Nick Offerman on one of the podcasts, one of their podcasts. Ron Swanson, for those of you who don't know who Nick Offerman is.
And if you don't know.
Right. And he gave his take on Field of Dreams, and I have not watched the movie since, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to watch it again.
It was that much of it
he's not a fan of that movie. And it has nothing, it is all because the farming is unrealistic. and like I can no longer, so like the whole premise of the movie is that this guy is going to lose his farm, because he's like cutting out some amount of it and giving up some crop yield to make a baseball field.
Sure.
And like Ron Swanson does the math on the average, or Nick Offerman does the math on the average size and acreage of an Iowa farm, and there's no way that like cutting out a baseball field would put you in a position where like you now don't have enough crop to keep your farm.
Sure.
He also, which this is the line I'll never be able to get out of my head, but he is ostensibly supposed to be, and this is, I believe, word for word what Nick Offerman says. He is ostensibly supposed to be an Iowa farmer, and he doesn't wear a belt. Not one time in the whole movie. So, like, that's my take on Field of Dreams, is that I can't watch it again after Nick Offerman did that to it.
Sure.
But I always loved it's not really a baseball movie.
No, it's a father and son movie.
Yeah, it's like Cat's Cradle, right? The song Cat's Cradle, just a movie made out of it with baseball as the backdrop. And like, how could you go wrong with James Earl Jones, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I have to kind of conveniently with Star Wars ignore the fact that transporting the plans for the Death Star in R2-D2, like, there's just no way that was the most efficient way to do that. There was no way that was the only option available. Like,
so what you're saying is we need a Field of Dreams, like a Rogue One, but for Field of Dreams.
But I'm saying I don't want to do it, right? Like I don't want to do it. You know, my mom took me to in '79. We're supposed to do housekeeping, but like we need to complete this. This is way better than housekeeping. Thank you, longtime listeners that are indulging us in this movie talk. So my mom, I want to. Empire came out in either '79 or '81. 80. Okay. So Empire comes out in '80. I'm 3 years old. My mom takes me to, at the time they did like a limited number of like back-to-back showings. Okay. Because Star Wars was like a global phenomenon in '77. Empire comes out and they're like, oh, we'll just do them both. Right. And the story that my mother tells, and this is not the most, doesn't point me in the best light, but again, I'm 3 years old. Yeah. I was so wrapped up in it that like I literally just like peed my pants because I would rather do that than get up and not be enraptured by...
That's a great reason to pee your pants. 3-year-olds pee their pants all the time for terrible reasons.
Yeah,
that's not one of them.
Yeah, and I was a May baby, so I don't know. I mean, do the math. I was probably still. I don't even know that I was 3 yet. Yeah. So, the late stage revival of Star Wars, because Star Wars was just a thing that happened when I was a child, and then it was just kind of over, right? And I mean, I suppose in the intervening years, you had things like the animated series, right? And you had books.
A lot of books.
A lot of books. And like, don't sleep. Some of those books are actually pretty good. Very much firmly playing my nerd card. My wife looked at me the other day and was just like, "You're the nerdiest person I know." And I was like, "Of course I am." Prior to the prequels, right? It was just Star Wars as a thing that existed, and there was some. It was like the X-wing and the TIE Fighter games on PC. You used to go to the go to the arcade and play like the rotoscoped Star Wars game. And that was the only way you could engage with it. And then they did the prequels. And leading up to the prequels, they re-released a lot of the toys. There was like a lot of stuff out there. And it was just like, it's gonna be back. It's coming back. And then me and my buddy Ian went and we went down to where do we go see? The Cinerama downtown, which was like at the time it was like the best theater in Seattle, and it's a really old theater. It's just downtown. It's a wonderful place. Paul Allen owns it now. I don't even know what he's doing with it, but he actually poured a bunch of money into it at one point. Great theater. We park, and we're like so excited that we're gonna go like see these new Star Wars movies, and there wasn't any like online. I mean, it was what, 98?
I was gonna say, I think I was 7, so that would have been 98.
Yeah, I think it was 98. So like there wasn't any like online. I don't know that I'd gone to like Ain't It Cool News. I don't even know that Ain't It Cool News existed back then. We walk to the theater. We're super hyped up. We get good seats. Super hyped up. They're starting to play the credits. I'm sorry, they're starting to play the previews, and I realized I didn't put any money in the meter at all. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, am I tolerant of having my car towed to watch Star Wars? Because again, I've paid the cost before when I was 3 years old. I'm like, I don't have the money to actually get my car out of tow, so I sprint 4 blocks down wearing like baggy jeans and Timberlands, because again, it's 1998 and I am that guy. I sprint 4 or 5 blocks away, get the money in the meter, and it was like a 2-hour meter, and I knew the movie was going to be like, it's like 215, 220 plus previews. I'm in the red already. Yeah. I sprint back. I get back to my seat literally as the credit crawl starts. And I'm like, oh, like I did it. I lined everything up, and I had some blockers, and I still got here for this movie. And then the movie happens, and we get up and we walk out of the theater. We're like, what was that? And again, I suppose Star Wars is a fundamentally different experience when you're an adult and not a child. And maybe that was the first lesson that I learned. You know, it's just like, maybe when I was a kid, Jar Jar Binks would have been a tolerable character that I wouldn't attribute a certain amount of like weird racist behavior. Like
as a 7-year-old, very tolerable character.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't until like later that I was just like, yeah, that one wasn't very good.
Yeah.
But like that one came out and it was great for a 7-year-old, and then they had like the Star Wars pod racing video game that was like also like it was huge.
Big N64 guy. Anyways, this is a youth baseball podcast.
Sometimes.
Sometimes after 3 years of doing this show, like you just know we're going to talk about some stuff. Anyways, quick housekeeping, axbat.com, code DL20, get yourself 20% off of all your ball and stick sport enthusiast tools. D, ChatGPT list.
There you go.
D as in Dinglehopper. L as in Lollapalooza. Dinglehopper Lollapalooza 20 will get you 20% off at
Try
axbat.com.
forgetting that one.
Yeah, like I got you. We're locked in. Skills Skill Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. It's, you know what? I'm feeling a little LeVar today. It's the best youth baseball book you can buy. I'm sorry, it just is. And I'm saying that as a guy who like read all the other books available to me and found myself lacking as a young baseball coach. I'm not trying to take anything away from like the Ron Polk book of baseball. I'm not trying to take away anything from
That one's not a youth.
Well, true.
Yeah.
True.
You're talking about the baseball playbook?
Yeah.
That one's not a youth one.
That one's pretty heavy. Shout out to Ron Polk.
Yeah, there's
Triple
like
OG.
it's that's one of my favorites because like there's in the table of contents it talks about the rules against cigarette smoking for players. And you're just like, give me all of it.
Let's go, Ron. I'm here for it. Baseball the Ripken Way, I think was probably one of the better ones that I read. That was a little bit more instructional focused. I'm not saying I'm a better baseball player than Cal Ripken. I would shoot myself in the head before I would say that, but I will say that like if you're looking to do youth baseball development the way that we ascribe to do it, and if you want to get all that stuff, it's just the best tool for that. Youth baseball, whether you're working with a player individually, whether you're coaching a team or you're running an org, all the tools are there. Shout out to my mom who made me drive to her house this morning and sign 2 copies of the book that she's giving away to a couple family friends of ours. I love you, Mom. The Youth Underload Smash Bat is a hitting tool that you can get right now, and it's a pretty great thing that you can add into your off-season development plan, as well as the Power Bat. I think we've done more consistent ad reads for that here than we've ever done on like socials. I got to solve that problem because, that's a good thing. We got a new package of drills that are going to come out for the Power Bat specifically on the youth side. I think we're going to probably end up posting them on YouTube. More details about that later. Shout out to Jay at Axbat. And then Academy Flex. You want to train with Driveline as a youth player, whether you are close enough to be able to be in a gym, whether you want to do this thing remotely, if you want to exist in this test-retest model of training, Academy Flex is a thing. You can jump in and start training today, whether you're close to a gym or not. Obviously, it's a lot better if you are. So if you can just come in once to the Washington facility, to the Arizona facility, to the soon-to-be-open Tampa, Florida facility, Flex is a thing, and that's it. Okay. I suppose we can go back to baseball movies. We gotta. That one is one we gotta research.
We will. We got to look it up because there's a lot of youth baseball specific movies.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, there are. I mean, there's one that's the best, and then there's all the others, but there are a bunch of them.
I bet we're gonna have an argument about that.
I can't wait.
Because I'm guessing you're referring to Bad News Bears.
No. Sandlot.
Okay, all right. Then we're on the same page.
Yeah, Sandlot
Okay.
is the best.
Yeah. I don't truly, and I'm aware of how this sounds, I don't think I'd be sitting where I am if not for the movie Sandlot.
I don't know that my kids would love baseball the way that they do if it were not for the Sandlot.
Yeah. That was like, I was 4 or 5 when that came out.
Yeah.
And that was, in the VHS days, and like,
yeah.
we didn't have like movie channels or anything like that. So it was like,
yeah,
you only had the VHSs that you had to watch, and I must have watched that one 3 times. That and Rookie of the Year, because
Another
it's
great
Cubs
movie.
specific.
Yeah.
I must have watched the 2 of those 3-4 times a week apiece growing up.
Yeah.
And Little Woman, because I grew up with a sister, and every time I watched Sandlot, she
made you trade.
That was the horse trade, so she knows that movie by heart, and I know Little Women by heart.
Yeah.
The Winona Ryder version, not the new one, obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure. So after we did the Mammoth Pod last week,
Thanks for listening.
Thank you guys for listening. I will confess, I usually try to listen back after we record. Last week we ripped it on a Friday morning, and then posted on Friday afternoon. So I didn't listen until we posted it. And I was kind of just like, did I say anything too stupid? I know I got a little emotional a couple times. Like, did I do anything too much? That's okay, fine. We're just going to ship it. I tried to listen to it over the weekend. I only got like halfway through.
Well, yeah, it was 2 hours.
So either apologies or thank you for tuning into that. I do think it's the best podcast we've ever done. Today, however, I don't think I don't know what I'm saying. I don't think we're going to go 2 hours. I guess we'll see.
We already spent, 10, 12 minutes on
on
movies
and Star Wars. We'll go a little bit shorter today for you guys who have lives and can't just, burn several hours listening to us blabber about youth baseball. We're going to do the thing, I think, where I post some clip here or some graphic thing here, and we're going to talk about it. And as per usual, I've given Jeremy the most barest information on the stuff that we're going to see. One of those things, I'm not going to pull up the clip and derail the show, but the first thing is this graphic here, which I'll host somewhere here.
Where's that from?
I don't know who made it. I mean, I assume it's Coach Todd Wolfson, the head coach of baseball at St. Francis High School. They're the 2014-2020 California State champs. Anyways, Todd posted this clip up or picture up, and it's like an old. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the cartoon series because it's all in that same style, right?
It just looks like a newspaper cartoon.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a newspaper cartoon, and there's two lines of people queuing up, and one of them, and it says travel ball registration, and there are two lines. One of those lines says player development, skill, and weight training, and there's nobody in that line. And then the other line is people signing up for travel ball registration. And at present, Todd's post has 200,000 views. I've got another several thousand on top of that. So obviously a lot of people have seen that. And if you're a loyal listener of this podcast, then you know exactly how we feel about that and the general construction of what it means to try to sell a thing that is most beneficial for the actual customer, which is the player, but requires a little bit of massaging to help parents understand. And I'm actually, let's connect these two things. Because that's one thing. And obviously the thing that is being pointed out there is just that year of our Lord 2024, travel ball signups are very rarely going to be underattended. Let's just call it that way, right? It's a product that is in high demand. And the thing that's being sold, I think, is an experience that largely people think just revolves around the game. Witness the number of people that play fall ball, right? It's just kind of a direct expression of that, right? Look, I'm going to have you sign up for a team program and, take your money. Hey, let's start going play some games immediately.
Right.
Which carries some consequence about opportunity GR development relative to choices in your schedule, relative to whether it's healthy for you to go on and do that. There's a lot of stuff to be concerned with. And it's a lot easier to sell that very basic and vanilla construction of select youth sports than it is to do the other thing that we do. We don't aspire to do it. We literally do it, which is bundling the training, the athletic development, skill development into a team format. So, cartoon here, right? The other thing that I saw this weekend, I think Danny sent me this clip. I don't remember. He sends a lot of stuff to me on Instagram. We go back and forth. But it's view from the first base dugout of a youth baseball game. And it looks like these kids are generously 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
I'd lean more towards 8. Team in the field is wearing yellow jerseys. The team on the bases is white and red. You don't really see the base hit. The camera from the first base dugout side is kind of aimed at first base and the coach on first base. Okay. Player comes up the line, and he's hustling, and there's no play there, right? He had obviously got a knock. He's on first kind of regardless. And as he's coming up the line, it kind of looks like he's going to round the bag a little. Not a hard, hey, I'm going to take a round, I'm going to take a look and see if two's there. So
he's an 8-year-old base runner.
He's an 8-year-old base runner, right? And as he's coming up the line, the coach on first base kind of does two things simultaneously. And he kind of high-fives the kid and then also kind of looks like he kind of touches him in and around his back area. And as these things happen simultaneously, the player basically stops and stays at the bag. So, what then appears to happen is a suggestion from the other team talking to the umpires to say that, like, hey, the coach made inappropriate contact with the base player, with the base runner, stopped him from advancing, and therefore should be out. And there's some consternation about what's going on, et cetera, and then that is the ruling that they came up with. The umps decide, hey, you touched the player before you reach the bag or whatever. Base runner's out, and that's the last out of the game. And then what happens next is pretty insane. Because the kids on the red and white team kind of don't seem to understand what's going on. And certainly their parents as well. The kids on the other team, they're losing their minds, and they start celebrating this win by way of technicality. And somebody, and I don't know if it's a player on the team, I don't know if it's a parent or whatever, they then, because again, remember you're on the first base kind of dugout, so you're looking across the field, and you see somebody runs out into left field with like a giant flag on a mast, and they're like running around celebrating this victory. Meanwhile, the coaches of the red team take their team into right field, and they're trying to explain to the kids like what the heck just happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's relevant to connect these two things together. And I will confess that like I didn't do when I see these clips, sometimes I'll go like on the deep dive, right? And I'll try to find the original video source, and from that I'll try to extrapolate like what's the actual name of the team. I'll try to find their game changer record. I'll try to look up on the UTrip website. Like I'll go dig deep. I didn't do that on this one because I don't know that it necessarily merits it. It doesn't really change. Doesn't change anything about what happened. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's relevant to like understand that cartoon and this desire for parents to flock towards a very basic and vanilla configuration of travel ball, right? The travel ball registration, and then understand that like that's part of the thing that you're also signing up for too. Because when you engage with this idea of select youth sports and you do it without any type of attachment to the thing that actually matters, which is development, then that's kind of the output that you're going to get.
Yeah.
You're going to get people going out of their way to win a game as scummy as possible, and they're going to celebrate that because you checked the box you intended to check.
Right.
And all of it misses the point.
So I don't know if you remember, I think they were 13 when it happened. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the exact circumstance other than I was in the third base coaching box. I want to say a kid hit a triple. Whatever it was, he was coming into third and didn't slide or anything. Didn't really round the base, but was off the base, and I high-fived him before time had been called or anything. And the other coach tried to get him called out. Mm-hmm. Because
I do remember.
I high-fived him before time had officially been called. Even though the ball's not at third, there's no play or anything.
There's no play.
I high-fived him before, and apparently I was grabbing him to stop him from trying to round and go home.
It's illegal touching.
Right. And I was just like, the ump came to talk to me about it, and I was like, yeah, I definitely high-fived him. Like, if you want to call that impeding the progress towards home, go for it. I definitely high-fived him. That was not the intention. I was excited. That's all that. And the ump in that situation told the other coach, I'm not going to call my hair. Like, I'm not going to do that thing.
Right.
It's a really good way to handle a 13U baseball game. I would expect that to be handled differently at 15U. And once you get to
100%.
older ages, right?
Yeah, post-high school, different.
Right. This season, I know we talked about the circumstance of the pod. I don't think we actually went over why it happened, but I got a kid on the other team called out because the other coach wrote the lineup card wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not doing that if they're not in high school.
Yeah.
That's a 16U game. Like that,
yeah.
It kind of matters at that point, right? I owe it to my kids to check every avenue and things like that, right?
Yeah.
When they're 13, 14, or younger than that, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you're saying the winning is the most important thing here. And sending that message very clearly to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said they were like 8. probably 8, 9, like very young in that video.
Yeah, in the reach of these type of clips when they're where they're propagated by like the bigger social accounts is pretty wide, and it's possible that somebody has more information about what the specific age of this team was is going to pop up and say, hey, they're 10. I don't care.
Yeah, no, that doesn't change anything.
I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
And it just to me it really makes me wonder, like, why are we having them play games with a score? Like what's the point? Like, truly, what's the point? And I suppose I should be more clear. Playing games with a score, sure. Like, let's definitely play games with scores because kids like scoring.
Right.
Like that. I mean, I've spoken ad nauseum about games and games and games. I guess the thing that I'm trying to drive at, and maybe I'm doing a crappy job of explaining, is I don't know that they need to spend as much time playing the game as they need to spend playing games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like, I don't quite agree with you on the not keeping score because, like, good luck, right? Like, someone's going to keep it in that dugout, and like everyone's going to know what the exact score is, or like a lot to a little, right? Like close enough that whether or not you keep score, I don't know if that actually moves the needle,
right?
But yeah, the way you approach the game and like arguing in that case, and again, I don't know if it was a close game. I don't know if they were.
I think it was 7-9. 7-9 when this whole thing happened. It's they
and the team in the field won.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so tying runner's about to come out to the plate.
Yep.
So like, you can't tell me that didn't factor into this coach's decision to
100%.
Like try to get this kid called out.
Yeah.
And at that age, you should, as a coach, be conscious of like, if I argue this right now, and this kid gets called out, how's that kid going to feel? Is he going to play baseball again?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that kid just lost his team, and for those of you who are listening to this, I'm air quoting here, but like lost his team the game because his coach high-fived him and celebrated.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're trying to teach the fun of baseball.
Yeah, and to me the thing about not keeping score really is largely informed by like the Norwegian soccer development programs where they just like, I want to say it was the Norwegians. It's not just because I've got some lineage back there. Shout out to my people. It's because they use that as part of an overall strategy to overhaul their entire development model. And it's not that they're not playing games, and I think to your point, it's not that the kids don't keep score.
Right.
I honestly,
it's what are you showing is important.
Yeah,
right.
And I honestly suspect that like maybe the most significant area of effect on not keeping score of a youth sporting game, it's not the kids, it's the adults.
Yeah, and what decisions are you going to make with the score in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the position that you're
like
in.
if that's the first inning of the game, are you arguing that kid should be called out?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this on last week's Megapod, as I'm sure we've talked about in damn near every episode of the pod. You can just put your ear to the ground of youth baseball in general, and because people are playing fall ball right now, you're going to hear this stuff is going to happen. You're going to hear about it, and you're going to hear about bad behavior on the. It's just blood in the street from adult behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's generally not the kids.
Generally not.
Like you see every once in a while, you'll see a collision at the plate. And, the base runner, might feel like they were tagged a little bit aggressively. And, kids would get up in their chest. And like at the high school age, you'll see stuff.
I was going to say, I've seen that at a high school age,
Yep.
and that's reasonable to me. I don't think I've ever seen a 12-year-old get chesty because he felt the tag was too hard.
No, I don't think I've seen that.
I've seen a 12-year-old parent yell from the stands and then instigate his kid.
Sure.
But like kids generally aren't thinking that way.
Sure. And that to me is just it's hard to not feel like what we've done is we've just kind of broadly professionalized lower and lower and lower and lower the experience for both the competitors and the quote-unquote fans.
Yeah. Do you think not keeping score for the adults would change the adult behavior? Or is it having less Like having no, like it doesn't matter if you win. Like having no stakes, whether or not you win, does that solve that problem more than the coach not keeping score or not knowing what the score is? Because that one is just like to me, it's basically impossible. Like if you're in a game, even if nobody's keeping the score, somebody's keeping the score, and you have some idea of how the game's going. You might not know like that guy's the tying run, but like I don't know. Generally, I don't know the score when I'm coaching.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a really tight game in the late innings,
Yeah.
and then I will have my assistant look at Game Changer and let me know. But like, I can get a feel for the game, and I don't need to know if it's a 1-run game, 2-run game. Like, it's a tight ball game or it's not a tight ball game to me until you get like late in the innings.
Yeah.
So I don't know if not knowing the score is really going to help, as opposed to just like removing the stakes from winning. Which, so who cares if you know what the score is if it doesn't matter whether or not you win or lose? Are you still making that same decision?
Yeah.
But then how do you get people to not care about winning?
I think it's a fantastic question. If I reflect back on my illustrious recreational baseball coaching career, of which I lost, I don't know how many games. I don't know how many games I won. I don't know how many games I lost. I do recall some pretty. So in terms of stakes, to answer that question. The way that our league generally worked is the regular season record was like largely irrelevant.
Okay.
And the only thing that you were kind of optimizing for was the end of season tournament championship.
Yep.
And seeding for that tournament again, air quoting, seeding for that tournament wasn't based on regular season record. And as a board, I think the perspective that we had is like, okay, if we're saying that the regular season is meaningless, then you should be empowered to try to develop your team over the course of a season.
Right.
And to be honest, a lot of like there's a whole chapter in the Skills and Skill book about approach to competition. And one of the things we talk about in the book is kind of like periodizing that approach, having a specific phase of your season that's aimed at kind of a, let's figure out what we got. Let's figure out what we got to learn, and then you kind of flip toward a more competitive configuration in the back half. That, my perspective there, and this is also something we talk about, in the Youth Baseball Development Certification that we launched almost 5 years ago, is all informed by that experience that I had, which was, for me, I looked at it like, if you actually want to dig back, I did a podcast with Mike on the old Driveline podcast back in 5-4 by our old desks, talking about a regular season team that I had that went 5-14 in the regular season. And that was pretty miserable, right? We lost 3 games for basically every one that we won, and then we played our way into the championship.
Right.
And in that season, I recall that my perspective was like, obviously, if I'm going 5-14 or 6-14 or whatever it was, I'm not either. I'm at a massive talent deficit. I'm a terrible coach, or I'm intentionally I'm not optimizing to win these games. Right? I would suggest that it's much more the latter. Like that was the intent. But in that season, there were other guys I was coaching with who they had the same stakes as I did, which was basically nothing.
Right.
And I remember, I want to say it was that year that one of the other coaches coached his game 1 starter to the pitch count limit in the first game, like game 1 in March or whatever, which forced us as a board to go, okay, that was, and again, this is probably 2018 or whatever. That was legal via PitchSmart. But we had to have, for anybody that's in a Little League configuration, you have your own local rules. And our local rules then from that point on mandated that like in March, you can't go to the pitch count limit for the first, I want to say it was like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, which again is an attempt to try to like force people to onboard correctly.
Right.
And I say all that to say that I think removal of the stakes is one thing, but I think so long as you're keeping score, you're going to find a coach that's going to optimize for outcome, even if there really isn't any like shining gold carrot at the end of, at the end of the stick.
100%.
So I don't know that just taking the stakes away changes it. I think the thing that you're trying to control for obviously is just parental behavior. And I think from that point, not keeping score is probably part of the equation that also fundamentally would change how are you playing the game? Like, are you still playing 3-up, 3-down baseball at 8U?
Right. What if instead of like standings based on wins and losses, your standings are, it's almost like roto in fantasy baseball, where like the team with the highest batting average and the highest on base percentage and the highest amount of strikeouts or whatever metrics you pick.
Sure.
That like they're ranked that way.
I think it's a positive iterative step, but the question is going to be, what are you going to do to go in search of those attributes?
Right. Well, if you don't include like errors or walks as part of that, you're going to maybe get less optimizing for, I hope this guy makes an error and less intentional walks, stuff like that. Like,
yeah, that's part of it. Because the first thing I start thinking about is like OPS, right? But OPS, as much as it's about slugging, it's also about on base percentage.
For offense, sure, you can still have, but on the pitching side, we don't want to penalize walks. They're young, they're going to walk people. So if you don't get penalized, well, I guess maybe that would increase intentional walks. If you're like, I'm not penalized for walks, I am penalized for giving up hits, and this kid's going to get hits, I'm just going to walk him. I guess that would go the other way. Yeah,
and if you, best case scenario, it's just like K through 9 or K through 6 or whatever. Not a terrible metric. But I think trying to suss out the offensive side is the tough one, because if you don't do some combination of both average and slug, I guess you might hyper incentivize guys to just get on base with really crappy, like handsy swings.
Sure.
I guess is what that would kind of devolve into. I don't know, man. It's so hard. And again, I guess the more fundamental question is, what's the point of grading production period at like 8U?
It's just getting them refocusing on what matters more than what doesn't.
Yeah. And
like if we can't trust, which I think by and large we can't, adults to do that themselves, is there some kind of change to the entire system that could be made that would force the adults to focus on the things that matter and less on the things that don't?
Yeah, and and this again, like Taylor Holiday was up here. We talked a lot about youth baseball over 3 days. And one of the things that we started talking about is like, you have to define success as a league, as a little league. Like, how are you evaluating that? And consider that most of the time, what I think is a really great success metric for little league baseball is retention.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably should be the only metric.
Yeah. Are kids still enjoying playing?
Yes. Are they going to want to come back and engage with the game that you provide them with, right? And I think that's applicable not only to like recreational players who are just starting in the sport, but also like, your mid-tier and your more competitive players. Are you able to serve all these different kind of parties who are all, even within the same age cohort, likely to be at very varying levels of just like athletic development, physiological development, et cetera? It's going to color the whole experience. The problem is that if we end the Little League season in June, right? It's just so we finish through the regular season, we do some All-Stars, we're going to finish in June. If you don't open up registration until, let's say, first day after Thanksgiving, you're not getting that signal until like the beginning of December about what your retention stuff look like. And when are you sussing out your coaches? Because if you are, if you're soliciting for coaches in December while you're still in the mix of getting this retention information, you might not get that information in time in order to make it actionable and say, that's a good coach, that I want to come back and coach again because 85% of his players are returning. I definitely don't want that guy back because 25 of his players are returning. That's anything under 50% would shoot like giant red flags.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And then just the basic timing of the system puts you in a weird place where you're constantly on the back foot about how do I get this information in time to be able to make a decision.
Yeah, there's probably some sort of mechanism that you could do at the end of the season, and it's not going to be 100% accurate because kids will say they won't come back and they will, or vice versa. But you can get at least enough of an idea per head coach.
Yeah.
Of are they good and retaining athletes?
Yeah, and it's just tough. Like we would put stuff out to families, and if we were like, hey, this is a league-wide survey, and we would do one at the end of the year, you'd get signal from like a very disproportionately small percentage of your population.
Yeah, as with any feedback form, right?
As we've talked about ad nauseum. But then when you're like, hey, the real feedback is when you're voting with your dollar.
Right.
There's some real time imperative to that feedback.
Right.
It's paired to your players' participation. It's just, it's tough. But again, the core argument for me is just, I think specifically at younger ages, and I will draw a line in the sand and say like 8 and under, I really just fundamentally question the value of having them play like a 3-up, 3-down, 6-inning conventional baseball game.
I would even go higher than 8.
Yeah.
I might go all the way to 10. For sure 9, but I might even say like 10 and below.
Yeah.
We don't need conventional baseball. If your kid is a 10U kid who is ready to play conventional baseball, have him play 11U.
Well, and
right, have him jump in age or even jump to 12U, right? Like you can have kids play up. That's not a problem if your kid is an outlier.
And that's one of the things that, like, and again, specific to Little League, and I suppose this even if this also is true in club ball too, you might find the ceiling for that for playing up a little bit sooner. That's the great thing about our game, and to a degree, like a bio-banded system of player development and player stratification, that's what it's going to get you.
Right.
You're going to slide players up and down based on what's appropriate for them. And I'm sure, like, I kind of like sometimes devil's advocate myself when I'm talking about this type of stuff. Like, does this sound really stupid? Is this going to work? And I'm thinking about what you just said. Single-digit ages all should not play conventional baseball. And that you're going to have some affordances need to be made for players who might break that conventional paradigm. I have that as lived experience.
Yeah.
When my daughter spent a couple years playing fast pitch, she came back as an 11-year-old. She came back to baseball for reasons that I think I've probably talked about. I mean, shoot, if you really want to go back to it. Yeah. We were on the pod and we talked through the whole thing. So if you want to dig into the archives and the old pod studio with the big tables and everything, you can find that episode about talking to my daughter about her experience as a girl growing up, playing baseball, spending some time on the fast pitch side, coming back to it, and ultimately the reasons why she left, and in the way that baseball still imparted a lot of perspective for her on her life, on the process-driven stuff that we talked about last episode, etc. But when she came back, she had not played baseball for almost 2 years. She was 11 years old. I was a little bit skeptical about her coming back to play Majors Little League Baseball at the time. I also felt confident that my 9-year-old son could play AAA baseball. So it was like, okay, cool, here's what we're going to do. And I wanted to be able to coach them both. Because the number one thing that I promised my then 11-year-old daughter is we're just going to have fun. In order to do that, control freak that I am, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to coach you. So I had both of them playing at a AAA, in the AAA division, which is basically like your advanced 9s through 11s. And it was fine.
Right.
It was fine, and it was fine for both of them. It was fine for Cora to be able to get this experience of coming back to playing baseball, playing on a field where they're all boys, and she's the only girl 99.5% of the time. And Danny could hang. It was fine. He was that player where playing against 11-year-olds as a 9 was totally appropriate, right? The next year, she had to go up to majors as a 12. He slid up to majors as a 10. It was fine. Yeah. It was totally fine. That's the great thing about our sport is we have that type of flexibility, and specifically in a little league environment, it's easy to make those specific accommodations. So if I could snap my fingers, and the more that I'm kind of thinking through it, I think you're right. Single digit ages. By the end of that 9-year-old season, sure, let's start to introduce the concepts of like 3 up, 3 down, 6 inning baseball. But the over optimization of like the technical aspect of it, I think largely more than anything else, it does a disservice to skill development.
100, and does a disservice to building a love for the game in a young kid because they get bored.
Yeah. And if it does both of those things, if it harms the skill development side and it provides the opportunity for like a not great experience, then like who are we serving?
Right.
Like who are we trying to teach here? Because, and then ultimately, to bring it back to the cartoon, the last thing that I think I wanted to talk about today is some other Instagram content that in TikTok or whatever, not a big TikTok guy, that I got sent. So I'm trying to think about a way that I can introduce this topic without crapping out the organization that provides it. So I'll thread this needle a little bit.
And just say they start with a P.
Sure. There's a large organization.
There's a few of them there too. So
yeah, there's large organizations, and I'm sure that they're not the only one. There are a lot of organizations where now they can provide basically like this service of showcases at damn near any age. And I get it. I get it in the sense that in a world where you don't realize that like the technological radar gun, and I mean like a literal radar gun is not something you have access to, that there's a certain amount of attraction towards the showcase thing as an ability to like get some metrics and have someone kind of answer like a very basic question, like, is my kid any good?
yeah.
I understand that's a service that they provide.
And I hear coaches are starting to put together their 2036 recruiting class. So
yeah, I mean, you got to get ahead of the
getting
curve.
your name out there,
sure,
for all the coaches that are definitely still going to be in those jobs in 10 years.
Or that those that those kids are going to be around, that they're not going to stink when they're that age. Anyways, I digress. So these large showcase organizations, some of them are pretty good about putting out post-session video of what they collect. And it'll generally be, side view of a couple swings, live ball, not a tee, most of the time. And then some stuff in the field, and then some 60 times or whatever. And there's specific accounts that you can find on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm sure that there's a Twitter parallel to this as well. That'll like go to the regional showcase provider's social, which has like a regional footprint. And they'll watch this video, the video that they post, and they'll find the kids who are like, for lack of a more
the Australian
term,
breakdancer.
They're the ray guns of this local regional showcase, and then they'll put that on their account, and it's like, 2 left feet McGee is a killer, 2036 with impact tools. And meanwhile, you see this kid and they're like, they can't hardly sprint in a straight line. They might, their pants are falling down. If the shoe flies off, their swings in the box are terrible. They don't really terrible.
Yeah.
They don't make any type of contact. You put them in the field and the kid like clanks the ball 5 times before they throw it across the diamond. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see, when kids are not good at this sport. Baseball's not a lot of fun when you suck at it.
No, it's not.
It's not. And I think that's true at basically every level. We talked a couple episodes ago about Joey Votto, right? And Joey Votto electing to retire because he was just like, I stink now.
Yeah.
I'm not any good. It's Joey Votto, man.
Yeah.
Generational hitter. And he still came to the conclusion that like this game sucks. It's not any fun because I can't compete. That is just as real at 35 as it is at 5.
Right.
Or at 15 or any of the stages in between. And so like I understand that aspect of it. And it's tough to have parents like you look at your kid and you just like, you want somebody to be like, hey, he's okay. He or she is okay.
Right.
They're good. And if you don't feel like you're qualified to make that assessment, and you see such and such showcase provider is coming to my town, and for the tidy sum of $400 or whatever, I can try to get someone's like tacit approval on the competitiveness of my child. You're like, hey, I got to spare $300-400 to answer that question,
Right.
Because you think that there's no other way to get that signal.
Yeah.
And then the kid goes out there and they clank a grounder like 3 times, throw a 5-hopper to the first bag. 60 time could be measured in years, much less seconds. Like the hitting looks, it's like the hitting is parallel to like when 50 Cent threw the first pitch of the Mets game.
Sure.
It's like it's really, really, really bad. And, again, we talked last episode about like the top tracer thing and about coaching. And it's tough to exist in that, I guess, space of like willful ignorance that like you just don't know any other way to get that signal about your kid other than to spend money. But then, for the consequence of spending money, your child's like underperformance then gets magnified 1,000-fold because it gets put on the internet and it's like, yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, hopefully those kids don't see those accounts that are
And
making fun of them. But yeah, I mean, you I think hit the nail on the head that it's kind of heartbreaking. And like I've been at those events,
Yeah.
not with like super young,
Yeah.
but at those events with high school age kids scouting and seeing kids as like, man, what are you doing here?
How do you not realize this is inappropriate for you?
Right? Like you know, like, and you could see in their body language, they know. They're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Right? I'll never forget. There was one that I went to in 2017, I want to say, in the Midwest, and a young first round hopeful named Jared Kelenic, who's from Wisconsin, was at the event, as were a bunch of kids that sucked at baseball. and it was just like, yeah. And there were like a handful of pretty solid kids there, and then there were some really, really rough kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's different from an invite-only showcase where like you're probably not going to see any
Yeah.
really, really low talent. Like you're going to see a range, but like nobody that's like, why are you here? And then you go to those events that are just like anybody can go sign up and pay. And yeah, it's alarming. And the worst part to me is they paid to find out an answer, and they're probably not going to get that answer from the people they paid.
Correct.
The answer is going to be gotten from either the kid on the way home saying, well, that was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like I just truly embarrassed myself, and like I'm probably not going to play baseball again, right? Like after that experience, I looked like an idiot. I don't want to get on the field again. Thank you, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Or the kid has no idea, and it's the parents in the stands watching, being like, "Wow, my kid is like clearly worse than the rest of these kids."
Yeah, you're getting the answer from the crowd.
Right. Or it's the third option, which nobody is self-aware, and
Right.
which is always a possibility.
Right.
And the people who provided that showcase are not going to go up to the parent afterwards and be like, "Hey, listen, you probably shouldn't spend your more money on going to more showcases.
Yeah.
Your kid's just like not where he needs to be."
Yeah.
No, their business model is kind of dependent on any of these showcases, dependent on that kid coming back.
Yeah.
So not only are they, unless they are self-aware at either the athlete or the parent level, but like they might go to another one if nobody is self-aware and they're like, yeah, maybe it was a bad day for you or whatnot. And like, we didn't get enough information to change our minds that you might not be good enough to play. So like, we're going to go to another one of these.
Yeah, and like the tricky thing is that like it's not just one bad day. You had like 365 bad days of wasted opportunities that led to this really bad day
Right.
that plays out publicly.
Right. And I will say, bad days exist to an extent,
100%.
right? Like there's an athlete who came in to try out for my team when I was in Europe.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I was in Europe. I didn't get a look at him. The coaches who were here were like, "Yeah, you don't want that kid.
yeah,
He's a good athlete. He's probably not going to crack your lineup, make your team, whatever." This athlete was pretty persistent, and so I was like, you know what? I'll bring him in again.
yeah.
He had a bad day the first time.
Yeah, and he looked way better the second time.
Way better the second time, and offered him a spot, right? Like, and it's so like bad days are a thing that can happen, but like it depends on what is bad. You can have a bad round of BP, you can have a bad bullpen, you can have a rough day in the field. Athletic traits are harder to have a bad day with.
Mike Trout went over on the game that the Angel Scouts went out to go decide if they were going to pick him number one or whatever they were going to do.
Yeah, there's a famous story that there was I can't remember what, but there was a scout that literally went to like 10 Mike Trout games and never saw him get a hit.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, if I didn't know any better, this guy'd be the worst player ever.
Uh-huh.
You don't always know, but like the athletic traits underlying, you will still be able to see at the base level.
Yeah.
So like you can, the output, maybe the output was really poor and I need to see the output again, but like the process, the inputs aren't going to change that much. And like, I don't know, most of these parents are not going to get the real answer from these providers because their business model exists because they need those types of kids to come to multiple events.
Yeah, I mean, and even the USA Baseball stuff from the summer, the first round that they had, we had a handful of academy kids that were there, and boy, some of those kids were just. Look, I get it. It's a free evaluation, I suppose. It's put on by USA Baseball, and I'm not trying to poo-poo anybody's desire to kind of just like, hey, let me just see, right? But I would also offer that if you have some amount of like self-awareness that you talked about, that you would realize very quickly that like there's no point to this evaluation at this particular stage.
Right.
Like it's just not. It's not going to give you the leverage that you think it's going to get, and that I think is the trickier thing. Is like where that impetus comes from. That like this is the leverage gaining opportunity that I'm going to put not only my time but my money into.
Right.
Because it just doesn't resolve that way.
Right. I mean, it's like, I feel like we talked about this maybe even a year and a half ago on the pod, but it's like if I could give you a practice test before you had to pay to go take the ACT or the SAT or whatever test you're taking, wouldn't you want to take the practice test and find out where you stand before you have to go out and do this publicly and like make a commitment to doing this and maybe pay money to do this?
Yeah.
Like there are ways to and our kids talk about it all the time because they will look and they will see. You can go on any website and see these state rankings.
You can go on Perfect Game site and look at their entire class,
right?
And you can see that it's really easy. You pull up their top. They're going to show you their top 10 or top 25 or whatever. You click into that kid, and it's going to show you their stuff, and then it's also going to show you percentile rankings of that stuff, and you can extrapolate from that pretty quickly where if you have some data.
If you've got data.
You got something.
And, my kids all the time, I'm better than a bunch of those kids.
Yep.
My numbers are way better than a lot of those kids that are on the rankings. Yeah. They took the test when they probably shouldn't have yet.
Yeah.
Like, you're still not quite ready to take the test, but you're getting closer to taking that test. And, like, those, showcasing, but someone that's underdeveloped isn't worth going to a showcase.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like, and even at the top end of things, even at the older end of things, Danny did some stuff last summer that he's now getting contacted about, scout leagues in the fall and all this other stuff and other camps. And, the conversation that we're having about it is like, what does this choice look like in the current term relative to your long term? You're going into your sophomore season. Does it make sense to attend like a fall prospect camp at a college that you'd be interested in going into right now? Because what are they going to do?
Right.
You can't even talk to you.
Right. And it's rarely considered, I think, but like burnout's a real thing.
Yes.
Like all of these things sound really cool, and like I tell my kids, and I don't know if I've said it on the pod, but like if it's free, go. Like
Yeah.
if they're offering you a free invite to any of these organizations are, there's really no downside unless like you're not on ramped to be able to compete. Like if it's free, go, right? Like we'll figure out your schedule around that. That's fine, but like there is, if you're good, there's gonna be a lot of free opportunities, and like you then have to be pretty picky about what opportunities you say yes and you say no to, because if you're doing something every week or every other week or whatever it is, like burnout's very real, and I don't know, and there's not like a set age. It differs with each kid, but like at some point along your baseball journey, I was talking to one of my kids about this in the athlete meeting last week. It turns into a job as opposed to like a fun thing that you do as a hobby, right? And like I don't want to push any kid into that, because it is a different relationship with the sport.
Yeah.
It's a different relationship entirely. And if you don't ever want that relationship, I'm not going to push you into it.
Yeah.
When they decide they're ready for it, okay, great. Let's flip that switch. And like, now you have to understand that like you need to approach this more seriously. The way you sleep, the way you eat, like all of those things factor into this. You're in the top, 3 percentile of baseball players your age. Now you got a group that you're fighting with for those spots. That top 3 percentile is strong. How are you going to separate yourself? You've already separated yourself from the other 96, 97. How are you going to separate from the rest? It's a job now, right? Like you got to take this seriously. Like you're going to have to sacrifice things like, hey, did you like going to homecoming? Did you want to go to your high school football games or do social stuff? Like, if you're a junior who's throwing upper 8s, low 9s, it may be time to start thinking about sacrificing some of those things and like, or at least like, how can I have my cake and eat it too? Like, right? Like, am I able to throw a bullpen immediately after school, get my lift in, and then go to the homecoming game? Like, and I'm always really wary of when to do that, because it changes with each kid, and like you can fall in love with baseball really quickly if you do it too early.
Yeah, because fundamentally, it's all about just kind of choice management. It's about opportunity cost, and it's really easy to kind of just say up front, oh, like I want that,
right?
Because there's no cost,
right?
But then, as you described, when you have to start going like, okay, I want to do both of these things. What am I going to give up to get there?
Right.
Because I think that's a thing you can do. And, I got a little bit emotional last week on the pod talking about some of the stuff we've talked about relative to Danny and just what's the most appropriate place for him to be in terms of high school. What are these next 2.5, 3 years going to look like relative to this affliction of like wanting to play the game at the highest level. And I've talked about it a lot with some good friends of mine, and my wife and I are still kind of talking through this thing, and we're not going to make any type of decision anytime soon. But one of the things that I was kind of just thinking about for myself is that, for him, it's not necessarily like I can only optimize my long-term goal if I make such a significant sacrifice. I don't think it's necessarily that. There might be some advantages in the it's real like logistical minutia. It could just be that you can do exactly what you're doing right now. You just have to make different choices, right? Like you do, and maybe one of those choices means that you do have less free time because you're gonna vacillate back and forth between the thing that you can't negotiate from, which is you need to execute high school. You need to figure out how to be a functional adult that has core critical thinking skills and can navigate your life, and then there's baseball. And it's not necessarily I can only do that one way. It's just if those are the two biggest things, and you kind of have to devote yourself to those two things at a really high level to get these type of outlier outcomes.
Right.
It's just it's part and parcel with what it takes. So again, it kind of comes back to this same thing about the parents, right? everybody wants to do travel ball because of the the keeping up with the Joneses effect, the esteem, the ability to go talk about your kid around the the water cooler. Like, and again,
And that's the reason why they want to do showcases too.
Yes.
Right? When they're talking at the water cooler, I took my kid to a showcase this week, and they're not saying, yeah, he was awful. Like, he
Yeah.
wound up on a TikTok making fun of kids. Like, no, they're not saying that, right? Like, I took my kid to a showcase.
Yep.
Oh.
Hey, we're on the showcase circuit,
Right.
And that's where the conversation ends.
Right.
It's not like, oh, like how did it go?
Right.
Oh, he was terrible.
Right.
He was super bad.
Right.
Like nobody's really having. Oh, we went there. It was a real great experience. The coach was like, you're going to talk about all the stuff around. You're going to paint around the actual like the circle of truth, which is my kid's real bad and they need a lot of work. And there's like super deficient in these really specific.
The coaches
areas.
were all like pointing at my kid and talking about him. It's like, yeah, not for a good reason, no.
Yeah. Yikes. So yeah, I guess we're in that phase of things where fall ball is starting up. Inevitably, you're going to find showcase stuff around that, and I guess for me, I would highly encourage anybody who has the opportunity to either take action from this or send to a parent that you might be knowing that's considering this. It's just like, consider, is there a different way that you could get that type of insight into the question you're trying to answer? Because number one, if they're super young, it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
It's just a straight up waste of money. We run an internal academy showcase here. We don't do it for our 14-year-olds that aren't in high school yet, right? We don't do it for 13s. We don't do it for 12s for a reason.
Right.
For a real specific reason, which is there's no action to be taken from that that information. There's no action to be taken from that environment.
And we have metric thresholds.
Yes.
Not every high school kid that we have gets to automatically participate. You have to
Correct.
hit certain metrics because we don't want you to embarrass yourself in front of college coaches. And sure, there's an element of we don't want to embarrass ourselves.
Yep.
And like show a kid throwing 77, right? But that's a real thing.
Yeah, and the showcase provider is really not beholden to that at all. Like they're gonna they're gonna collect information about everybody, and it's just some percentage of those kids have no business in that environment.
Yep.
And but nobody's gonna not take your money.
Correct.
So you got to be. We need to raise like the global level of information and knowledge for parents at just like when it's appropriate and when it isn't, because you're going to find someone to take your check. You're going to find someone who wants to put you on a travel ball team, and whether either one of those things is appropriate for you or appropriate for your player relative to the goals of the program, relative to the deliverable of the showcase, is kind of open to interpretation. And there's a lot of runway on both sides there. So do with that information what you will.
For sure.
I don't have much else. The only hilarious thing that I have is you're gonna find out at tonight's practice somebody decided to run 5 miles this weekend. That may or may not be my child for no reason at all. And he says to me the next day, he's like, "My legs are real sore, Dad." Hey man, hey man, I don't know what to tell you. But I will say, a great thing to learn in September.
Yeah.
Before we get into our velocity phase. And it was a great opportunity for us to actually like talk about the physiological effect behind that. I think a lot of kids don't really understand this idea of workload and overtraining and recovery until it lands on their doorstep. And it just so happened that he goes out and he's like, and Dad, I felt great. I wasn't tired. And my legs felt great. So I just kept running. And my legs felt great. So I just kept running. And then I went to the grocery store and got a chocolate milk, and everything felt great. And it's like, well, first of all, good on the chocolate milk. You need the calories. Like I'm in on that.
I'm going to call him Forrest Gump. I just started running and it felt great. So I didn't stop. I already have one Forrest Gump on my team.
I know you do. It was funny, but then we did get a chance because like I was scrolling something and I saw this guy. I think his first name is Paul. I can't remember his last name, but I think his Instagram tag is like Lift Run Bang. Okay. And he's a savage. He's crazy strong. He moves crazy weight, but he's smart as hell. And everything when he talks about lifting, like he gets people super pissed at him in the comments because he'll talk about really, really high level research that's done that informs the way that he runs his programs. And it just so happened that on the same day that Danny told me he went out and ran 5 miles entirely because it felt good and whatever, Lift Run Bang had a post about overtraining. And he's like, I talk to athletes all the time who they're overtrained, and that in his specific sense in terms of weightlifting, it's all about guys that do like 8 to 10 and 20 rep sets who are not lifting enough weight, which allows them to work to that workload. Right. But the lack of weight is reducing kind of the stimulus for power production and strength that you're actually looking for. And then it also screws you up because you get so overtrained and you're just in this perpetually like non-recovered state. Right. And he had a post that was just like, look, the reality is that, he's going, I work with these athletes and I get them to a not overtrained, over-fatigued state, and then they PR and they're like, oh, that's so awesome. And he's like, no, you dummy. That PR was just waiting for you. Right. You just had to put yourself in a position where you actually could receive it without being overtrained. Right. So,
but it is an incredibly difficult thing to explain to an athlete until they feel it for themselves. And it's the same thing with nutrition in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right? I had an athlete on, was it Friday?
Yeah, we had a great conversation with an athlete on Friday.
Who is trying to lose weight, and I am okay with that, as long as he's doing it in the right way.
But the right way has a lot of...
Correct. Showed up to our 5 p.m. practice having not put a meal in his body yet. Snacked.
Not even
a yogurt,
snacking.
like a couple eggs, some nuts, right? Like there was not real...
Yeah.
Nothing real put in. And couldn't... Still probably... We're not there yet. But like couldn't connect the why am I so tired?
Yeah.
At practice with the dude, you barely ate today. Like, what do you mean? Why are you so tired? You barely ate, and then you just threw and hit for an hour and a half, and now you're in the weight room. Why wouldn't you be tired?
Yeah.
Like, you have no fuel. Your gas tank is empty right now.
Your human machine is lacking.
But it's really hard, especially for youth athletes, to fully understand that until it hits them in the face.
Yeah. I mean, and I think about this with like our smart reports too, right? Like the first, we've got smart reports rolling out. It's an app driven, the thing for us, I think in our software platform is like Track is designed to kind of pull everything together and put it in one place, allow athletes and trainers to make to make choices about that information they're presented to, because it's all in one place. The iOS apps and the smart reports are, I think, the further distillation of that same thing, because it's just like boom, front and center of the athlete, green, yellow, red. And the first recovery day that Danny threw, he had a red because it said, hey, your peak arm speed should be X. Your arm speed on this recovery day was Y. You're a little bit higher than it should be, so like dial it down. And we had a really interesting conversation afterwards where I was just like, hey, you probably need to be a little bit more mindful on your arms. Just let the recovery day be a recovery day, truly. And then we start talking about that, and we start talking about throwing indoors. And he was like, Dad, next time that I have to mocap, I want you to turn the radar gun off. And I was like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah, I don't want to try to like chase a number before I get in there, because it's and I was just like, yeah, man, I know. I think there's just a different way to kind of like receive that information. It's not that the radar gun is bad. It's that we probably need to reframe a little bit what the warm up and like on ramp into a mocap retest needs to look like to be there in a place where you've got the gas in the tank and the capacity to go out and throw harder.
Yes, but I will say, I think I've heard that from many of my athletes, and I think that means we're doing our job well, and that they're using the radar gun as a feedback tool and not as a test.
True.
Right? Like, I'm not trying to chase a velo, but like I understand that's like a really important feedback tool for me.
Yeah. Well, the interest in the funny thing about that, it's that I think is directly in line with what you're saying, is he was telling me he's like, it's just different than when I'm warming up to pitch, because I'm warming up to pitch. I use long toss as my gauge. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I know that I want to work out to kind of a specific distance, and when I can do that kind of comfortably, I feel like I'm really good in. He's like, but when I'm long tossing indoors, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, 100%.
So he's trying to like pair these two things, the long toss distance and velocity. It's like, all right, well, the issue really isn't the feedback. It's just getting the feedback that you receive in a different environment actionable the way that it is when you're on field.
Right.
Which is, these are good problems to have.
Yep, 100%.
You know, and good problems to have. And again, with the smart reports, if there was a smart report tied to heart rate variability, which is a thing that we're working on, and Danny had tracked this 5-mile run that he went on, I know that it would show that like his readiness score today would probably be lower than he would want it to be. Mm-hmm. We don't have that, so all he can use is just like the fatigue in his leg that he feels. And I mean, you know, we got a chance to like have all these cool conversations about like throwing recovery back in the day for pitchers, where it's just like, oh, just go run. You're gonna flush the lactic acid out, as if, because that's just how that works. Yeah. The old, was it Steve Carlton and like the big like bag of rice and just shove your arm in. So yeah, baseball's such a great game because it's been around for so long. We've just seen like these phases of dumb training modalities come and go, and maybe they're not even dumb. Maybe it's the best that we have available to us at the time. And then we learn some more stuff and we figure out a more ideal path, and that's just.
But not everybody adjusts.
Yeah, because sometimes this stuff is just like religion, and trying to tell somebody that their religion is wrong. Tough conversation starter.
And other times it's not religion. It's just I'm asking you to change, and people don't like to change.
Yeah.
Or learn anything new or anything like that. Right? I've been, a lot of high school coaches have been there for a while. It's working for me. Why should I change it?
Right, 100%. Or you could fall in with us in the adapt or die crowd.
You could do that too.
Thank you for the brief pod listen today.
I don't think it was that brief.
Well, probably not.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
I don't feel like we were as brief as we said we were going.
You're right. 15 minutes about Star Wars and kids' baseball movies, and probably 45 minutes later we put in an hour. We really should do the youth baseball movie rankings.
Oh, we got
to do that.
We will.
We got to do that. We'll just do that next time. Well, we want to do the IMTP one. I don't know. We have two.
That one they'll take more research. We could do the baseball draft next week.
Yeah, we'll do the youth baseball movie draft next week. That'll be a fun one. I don't even remember what our DNR. It was Dingleberry.
No,
it wasn't Dingleberry.
No, it was not Dingleberry.
It was
Dinglehopper.
Yeah, Dinglehopper.
Two different things.
My ChatGPT prompts were Dinglehopper. Lollapalooza? That was one of the other options.
It was Dinglehopper Lollapalooza. And I said you won't forget it, and then we both forgot.
And then we did. Anyways, point being, code D and L and a 2 and a 0 will get you 20% off at axbat.com. If you go to drivelinebaseball.com, you'll find the Skills to Skill Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. You find the Youth Baseball Development Certification course. You'll find a bundle with those two things. I should probably talk about that more. You'll find the Power Bat. You'll find the Axe. You'll find the Youth Underload Smash Bat. You'll find all the tools that we have. You'll also find information about Driveline Academy Flex, about the Driveline Academy snapshots. We got all the things, drivelinebaseball.com. I think that's it. He is Jeremy. I am Devin. We are Down by Law. I'll catch you next time. Thanks. Bye. Yeah, that definitely was probably close to an hour.
Oh, dude, it was over an hour. I don't know what time it is, but there's no way that wasn't.
Son of a bitch, it was hour 20.
Yep.